You hear it all the time. A conservative is someone who defends the status quo, someone who is opposed to change in an abstract and unqualified sense, someone who just wants to keep things the way they are and regressively rejects the great and wonderful social change the liberals want to create. Interestingly, these kinds of conservatives are typically allowed to have their voices heard even under the purview of the liberal establishment. You might be familiar with the terms principled conservative, disaffected liberal, the real world, or even normalcy. I don't have a problem with these terms on a conceptual level, but they are often used to describe what is commonly defined as conservative. To contrast this character, other terms are used to describe those who are further to the right, those who are Christian, those who are nationalist, those who are anti-liberal, who are against the establishment. These terms include reactionary, extremist, or far right, terms with almost entirely negative connotation used as a bludgeon by liberals to discredit anyone who they can throw the label on. They'll tell you that this kind of person should not be listened to, that it is someone completely off the rails and believes in whatever conspiracy theory they think sounds the craziest. On a technical level, a reactionary, far-right extremist, or whatever else is just someone who wants to return to a prior state of things. When applied to politics, this could mean wanting a previous form of government, liking societal standards from a few decades or centuries past, something like that. This may seem controversial, but I'd like to raise the question: what makes such an ideology so extreme? Is it even so, or is the whole issue just a fabrication created to subvert the true form of conservatism? To answer this question, I have devised an analogy which should easily be able to illustrate my thesis to anyone who is on the right track of mind but doesn't necessarily agree with this opinion. I'm going to tentatively call this the Pink Road analogy. I think it's a good name, nice and provocative. Let's get started. Imagine there was a relatively normal man living in a relatively normal place at a relatively normal time. To make this story more personal, we're going to give him a name. Let's call him William Newman, or Will. The town he's living in has black roads, just nice looking black glaze over some rocks, the usual. One day, a foreign interest comes to visit the town from an organization known as Project Beautification. They start a campaign to try and convince the construction authorities, as well as the local populace, that making the roads pink would totally be more beautiful, citing studies from the prestigious Journal of Aesthetics that Will can't really grasp due to its use of fancy terminology. He also just doesn't care that much, because to him, it's just some eccentric literature with no real power. Months go by, and through the overwhelming effort and financial contribution, they convince the construction companies to actually start making the roads pink. William is not a fan of this change, but he didn't take things too seriously at first. But after seeing the effects in his local community, he started speaking out against the pink roads, championing the proliferation and maintenance of black roads. A serious debate raged on between the pink road activists and black road defenders. At first, Will's viewpoint was quite popular, but over time, people began to accept their new reality, however begrudgingly, as those who are fans of the pink roads are much more zealous, feeling very strongly about the importance of pink roads, making it an integral part of their lives. Those on Will's side, on the other hand, see it as just another annoyance in a sea of more important struggles. Will is respected by some rather popular thinkers for his cautious conservatism and aversion to rapid change. These thinkers call themselves conservative in the sense that they are skeptical of the assertions that pink roads contribute to societal progress. This group is thought of as moderate and level-headed. Of course, their principles are not what drive Will's ideology. He just thinks that black roads are way nicer looking than pink roads. And after many years, pink becomes the default road color in the popular consciousness. Around this time, a new group, known as the Organization for Illustrious Design, begins to broaden the original goals after further research into infrastructural aesthetics. They discover through rigorous study many detailed aesthetic flaws in contemporary road design, and argued that pink roads would be improved if they had blue polka dots. It took some time for blue polka dots to break into the mainstream, but after enough funds were thrown at the media, it eventually became a topic of discussion. Before long, a vicious debate brewed among those who wished to implement the blue polka dots and those who wished to keep the pink roads as they were. As one may suspect, the moderate conservative thinkers fervently opposed the blue polka dot road movement, and by extension, in favor of preserving pink roads, with the exact same argumentation they had used to combat pink roads in the past. Particularly attentive intellectuals of the Organization for Illustrious Design point out the hypocrisy in the arguments used to defend pink roads. They assert that they inhibited all forms of progress, that dirt roads would remain the norm if the theory that went against blue polka dots was accepted. They powerfully presented the problems associated with pink roads to formal and popular institutions alike, garnering support one step at a time. Having been involved in the discourse regarding roads in the past, William found himself in the midst of it once more. He was a huge fan of the ideas from the Organization for Illustrious Design regarding the numerous faults with pink roads. Many points were not too different from his own. Taking this opportunity, he once again began propagating to the public. He argued strongly for the implementation of traditional black roads in order to address the now growing discontent for pink roads, expecting to have a second chance. Contrary to what he was hoping for, Will was rapidly shut down by just about every major institution. His aesthetic opinions were labeled extreme and reactionary, frankly unacceptable. Up-and-coming commentators who agreed with the polka dot initiative put out hit pieces online exposing Will, through conflating the notion of being against pink roads with necessarily supporting blue polka dots. Indeed, once pink roads with blue polka dots enter into the public consciousness, black roads are shoved out and become unthinkable. Now let's zoom out from the analogy for a second. Go ahead and replace the roads with political issues. The strategy becomes clear. Step 1. Identify an aspect of society you would like to change. Step 2. Use whatever powers at your disposal in order to garner support for your proposed changes. Step 3. Exercise force along with whatever allies gathered in order to push the changes through, whether or not they are popular. Step 4. Concoct a more extreme version of the changes as the true opposition to the current state of things, in order to make the prior changes seem moderate in comparison. Repeat the above steps until satisfied. Perhaps this strategy is most obviously demonstrated in the realm of socioeconomic theory. The whole dialectical method is in essence an application of the pink road analogy. Even more so than the early communists, modern, ultimately liberal cultural Marxists have forgotten about earlier socioeconomic forms entirely and have aimed all their efforts towards the critique of capitalism, assuming socialism is its sole replacement. In this way, they serve the role of the Organization for Illustrious Design, playing along with attacks on modern liberal ideology, which ultimately reinforces its dominance through the elimination of anything which precedes it. The delegitimization of black roads not by direct attack, but by elimination through irrelevance. To a liberal, conservatism is essentially a manifestation of capitalism. The more conservative one claims to be, the more that person must be incredibly individualistic, selfish, and worshipping of the free market. In theory, it should be possible to win over many regular people with economic ideas revolving around national autarky and development, but it is a worthless cause in practice because such policy is more right-wing, which to most is synonymous with more capitalistic. By placing the idea of progress on a straight line, it is possible to institute one's vision through gradual steps, pushing it further and further under the guise of solving the problems with the previous, only by introducing worse problems with every iteration. Unfortunately, I don't have a perfect idea in mind to counteract the pink road strategy. I think it's employed in almost every issue, so our opponents can be systematically dismantled if we could counter it, but it seems brutally effective and thus very difficult to counter. A potential strategy I have in mind is to simply fight fire with fire, to push back against the pink road, not with a black road, but perhaps with a dirt road. Though this idea sounds fine, we do have to consider the fact that we aren't exactly at the stage of pink roads in our current political climate. We are in fact much closer to upside down pink roads with rainbow polka dots. Thus, to walk back the changes which have long since taken place will require us to take positions deemed extreme even by those who consider themselves conservative. We ought not be scared of holding views labeled as unacceptable from the perspective of conventional politics, for it is that very same convention which got us here in the first place. To be clear, this does not mean to alienate oneself in an anti-social way, burning every bridge by considering any who holds the slightest disagreement controlled opposition. Instead, it means to act according to truth and goodness, to be controlled by an authentic sense of virtue rather than fear of retribution or pride in one's lofty opinions. It is not crazy to disbelieve in transsexuality, nor is it crazy to recognize that there is no such thing as homosexual marriage. Neither is it sinful to point out flaws in the practice of democracy, nor should it be taboo to consider advantages in pre-modern economic models. There is nothing foolish about believing the Bible's history from start to finish, even if that includes creationism and a young earth. Every idea I just espoused is certainly unpopular, but it is exactly because we were silent that they became unpopular. The liberals never defeated the conservative worldview. They just ran from it and took all the cameras with them. They painted over the road and pulled the wool over all of our eyes as they went. One may be so naive as to think that allowing liberal ideology to propagate would lead to its own oblivion through its incompetence. Instead, they introduced new ideas. They painted over their past debts by taking out new loans and sustained themselves to this day. I hope you guys enjoyed my analysis. If it felt difficult, that's because it is. If the discussion feels incomplete, that's also by design. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this issue. I hope you are persuaded and agree that this is indeed a major phenomenon which we must address. And it would be great if we could think of some way to use it to our advantage. Ideally, there is an exploitable flaw, which I have yet to discover, which can be attacked in order to bring down the whole Jenga tower. If you think of anything, please do share in the comments. I think our entire movement has a lot of ground to gain. Thank you very much for watching. Leave a like and subscribe for more. That's going to be all for today.